Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. Time for Indie Spotlight for the week of March 26, 2025. Pretty good week. Overall, I'd say not as strong as last week. You know, if you checked out the other Indie Spotlight that dropped for last week, it dropped today, just probably minutes before this one dropped. Again, apologies. You can go listen to that episode and hear all the debacle of recording for an hour with literally no sound. Maybe I should have got a lip reader to I could have typed everything out. But anyway, pretty good week this week. Don't forget WonderCon coming up at the end of the week. Be sure you're following Comic Source on social media. You want to meet up for a drink or take a picture or get a Comic Source lanyard, happy to do that. And happy to have Rocky joining me on this episode to talk about the books this week. Yeah, there's some really great indie stuff. And again, apologies to everybody for not getting the one out last week in a timely fashion, but because there were a couple really great books, and I'm sure even though you didn't get to talk about them, Rocky, that you read Rockefellers and Power Fantasy. And I don't know, did you read The Last Boy from Dan Panosian as well? Because
I did. It was an interesting. I like the concept. I like the concept of sort of like a Peter Pan who's stayed young, but everyone else has sort of outgrown him. So
yeah, I mean, his nickname, the boy who won't grow up. It's just interesting to say, okay, let's extrapolate that out. He won't grow up, but everybody else around him has grown and evolved and changed, and he doesn't want to accept it.
I know. I love the cliffhanger too. It was quite good. So
yeah. And Power Fantasy, we finally got to see the last of the superpowers, Eliza Hellhound, and that line at the end where she says, "I saved the world. That was my sin." Yeah, that was brutal. And then
it's really good. Power Fantasy continues to just be a great series. Yeah. For sure.
When it comes to Rockefellers, I had to go back and triple check that it was issue 4. I really felt like we have had so much story, Rockefeller story, and I get that we had a Rockefeller story in the Ghost Machine one-shot sampler thing, so you could think of this almost as the 5th issue or whatever. But I could have sworn we were on like 6 or 7 because we've got. I feel like I know so much. Like they're packing so much story into those issues. Like it's quickly becoming one of my favorite Ghost Machine titles, but you know, as we always say, it's our favorite Ghost Machine titles, whatever one we read last.
Well, one thing about Rockefeller is it feels now. I haven't been reading Fantastic Four. I've heard good things of what Ryan North's doing with Fantastic Four. I think mainly from you or some others, but I have to say that for all the I read mostly DC and indie. Rockefellers is the best family orientated book that I've read by far. Nothing comes close.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And the art's fantastic as well. So anyway, that's all last week. It's in the other episode that's out today. I'm flying solo on that, so go and check it out. Don't have graphics for this one. Again, just in the interest of saving time and getting this out in a timely fashion. Didn't do graphics, but you will be able to see the books as we're talking about them. And we're kicking it off with the 3rd issue of The Lucky Devils. This is written by Charles Soule. Art, design, and cover A by Ryan Brown. We've got some variant covers by Trad Moore. Ryan Brown handles the colors as well, along with Kevin Nipstein, and then letters are by Christopher Crank. This has been a fantastic series. It's been so fun. And I know you've been enjoying it as well, Rocky, so give us your thoughts.
Well, I mean, the central conceit of it focuses in a world where there is no heaven, there's only hell. It focuses on 2 devils, or I guess demons, citizens of hell, named Collar and Rake, and they have a devious plan to overturn the societal hierarchy in hell, which is basically premised upon how many. The goal is to entice humans to sin, and they want to upset the apple cart in hell. They're definitely societal disruptors of hell. They decide to essentially reverse corrupt 2 humans named Star Winslow, who is a nurse. She's a nurse, and then Cameron Stain, who's a professor. These are 2 really good people, and rather than basically corrupt them, they want to make them do so much good that it disrupts hell. And hence the sort of ironic title to the series itself, Lucky Devils. It's really well done. Writer, why am I drawing a blank?
Charles Soule.
Charles Soule, thank you. Does a really good job with this series. This particular issue has the collar and rake, these demons, further manipulating Star and Cameron into their goal is to uh, empower them so that they become more powerful. More powerful do-gooders on Earth, and the manipulation in this particular issue is that together they arrange it so that the professor is elevated to a he rises in the ranks at the university because the one higher ranking professor create unfortunately at a dinner or a cook off, they orchestrate things so that the all the people that are at the dinner are poisoned. They end up going to the hospital where Nurse Star is, and they're poisoned, and she knows the precise nature of what they're poisoned with because Collar and Rake are telling them essentially whispering to them what to do. And so, of course, this leads to the nurse being a hero because she knows how to save all these people that were poisoned at this supper where the professor is. So she rises in the ranks of the hospital. Meanwhile, the professor rises in the ranks of the university, and so they continue to be elevated, which further upsets the hierarchies in hell. And it's really just Collar and Rick, these two demons, these two devious little devils. They continue to do what they've done really in the previous two issues here. They're just doing different things, and as Cameron and Star rise in the ranks, eventually at some point I'm probably they may intermingle or meet each other. It's going to have repercussions in hell. Exactly what kind, we don't know. We know there's chaos. Turtle Soul does a good job. There's many other little side characters, corollary characters in hell. Everyone has their own agenda, not just Collar and Rake. But there's also moral dilemmas, moral issues for Star and Cameron, and it's just very well done. It's multi-layers. There's little subplots here and there. It's very well done, and it's a great read. And we're only 3 issues in, and it's entertaining as hell. Just another example of why the indie market's doing so well. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. The art by Ryan Brown is fantastic. We talked about it when the last time when him and Charles were on. All the little sight gags, like when we see Rake going with, or Collar rather, going with the supervisor to see what the influence and the way they're doing it as they're traveling through these different sort of layers here. We can even see the genies from 8 Billion Genies there. So the sight gags and the art from Ryan Brown is fantastic. And you even see it here, in the gutters where we see these little bugs and what have you sort of crawling along, and which is just really, really fantastic. So, yeah, the idea of a dean of the university, the one that's in charge of the philosophy department, having an all-you-can-eat contest with seafood, with clams and mussels, for his special party for his donors, and they all get sick, and that's why he gets fired. Right? It's like, dude, you fed all these bigwigs and people that donate money to the university. You fed them like bad seafood, and of course they got sick. They're lucky that you're lucky you didn't kill anybody. So I love that Collar and Rake, these devils, like you said, they're trying to break the system in hell. It's not unrelatable in any way, shape, or form. If you look at the way labor is treated, here on Earth, where it's the fat cats that are getting rich and the people that are doing the work are sort of shit on in a lot of ways. Yeah. And so you can kind of relate to what they're doing. But the difference is that they don't care if they kill somebody along the way because they're devils, they're demons. It's not that they're evil. It's almost that they're apathetic. They don't value human life because they can manipulate so many. I mean, as each of these protagonists here rises in influence, Colin and Rake rise in influence as well. So the more successful they make their sort of surrogates here, their puppets, the more power they have, and it becomes cyclical, and they can more and more and more. So, but yeah, no, they have no morality and no scruples whatsoever. And when you couple that sort of anything goes mentality of characters with awesome art from Ryan Brown. You have something really special. The colors also that Brian does are really fantastic. So this is a 9-issue series, and you can see each of the issues kind of focuses on one particular of the 7 deadly sins.
Yeah,
So
seven deadly sins.
yeah, so we had like the first issue, or not the 7 deadly sins, but 9 circles of hell. So
Right.
gluttony in this particular issue as issue 3. So we still have greed, wrath, heresy, violence, fraud, and treachery to come. So yeah, definitely recommend it. Check it out. Second in a trilogy of sort of little creature stories, I think is the way Charles and Ryan are describing it, because we had 8 billion genies, similar, these little mythical creatures, and there's one more to come, which I don't know the creature yet. And obviously this is all comes on the heels of their very successful Curse Words series that they did over it. Well, so all right, let's see what we have up next here. All right, Hornsby and Halo over at Aftershock. This is from Peter J. Tomasi and Peter Snyberg. John Kalis on colors. Steve Blackwell's the designer. Rob Lee on letters. So for Zach and Rose, it's been an interesting ride as they've been exposed. They realize that they have powers, sort of these extra human abilities, and now they're sort of searching for an explanation because they don't really understand, what's happening. At the end of last issue, this adjudicator was revealed, and he's trying to explain to them, but they don't really want to hear it. They want to sort of believe this is like a fluke thing that's not really happening. And this, they're like, you look like some kind of lion, tiger, eagle guy, and so they end up just jumping in the truck that they stole, and running off, trying to escape from this guy because they don't really believe the things that he's saying with them, coming from heaven, one coming from hell. So they're trying to get away when all of a sudden they look out the windows of the truck because it's snowing. They're having a hard time seeing out the windshield, so they stick their head out to see where they are, and they see birds flying alongside the truck. And it turns out the adjudicator has literally lifted the truck up into the air because he wants a chance to talk to them and explain to them, hey, I'm the one that's been looking out for you. You're supposed to keep the peace between heaven and hell and become friends on earth and sort of broker a peace. And there are those that don't want that to happen. But he doesn't get the chance because, again, they're scared. They're kids. They don't understand what's going on, and you can kind of understand. So he takes them to the secluded drive-in rather, to explain to them, and they run off and they hide in the snack bar. And they're like swiping some candy. They're hungry. They haven't eaten all night. A stressful situation. When all of a sudden their bus driver starts knocking at the door, and so they're like, oh no, what's he doing here? We need to make sure he's safe from the monster that's chasing us. So they go and let him in, and lo and behold, the bus driver all along has been the adjudicator. And he's like, stop calling me monster. And he's trying to explain to them that he's been watching out for them all this time, and he starts transforming. And he's been a grave digger at the cemetery, been their music teacher. He's been one of their friends in their peer group. He's been a woman from the community center. He's been
A police captain.
a police captain. But do you notice the name Captain Brower, which I'm pretty sure that's a reference because he kind of looks like him to Andre Brower, who was on, I think it was Homicide: Life on the Street for a long time. But I know him, his most beloved role as Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, who tragically passed away a few years ago. But just a fantastic actor and a really great guy. So that was cool to see that as well. But based on that, they start to trust the adjudicator a little bit. And he starts to explain to them, what their role is, and they're like, oh man, this is a lot. And we don't know what the plan was originally for when they were going to find out about their powers and what their role was and what have you. But we just know the circumstances and the powers that are sort of aligning against them that don't want peace between heaven and hell have sort of manipulated events, and it sort of forced the adjudicator's hand. So he decides, okay, let me, when Rose demands that they be told everything, all right, step forward, and it's fantastic fantastically illustrated here by Peter Snyberg, and they sort of step inside him, and they go flying through onto this final page. It's all multicolored and everything, and you get the little tease. Next issue, upstairs and downstairs, obviously a reference to heaven and hell itself, and then the sneak preview cover for issue 6 says the ups and downs of being Hornsby and Halo. So that'll be coming in the next issue. So really fun. It feels like the story's starting to ramp up a little bit in terms of pacing. Yeah, just really great. The art by Peter Snyberg definitely suits kind of the youthful exuberance and the youthful spirit of these characters. And what I love about this one, very similar to what we were just talking about with Rockefellers, both of these titles you could really share with very, very young readers. I think as young as like 6 or 7. Rockefellers might be just skewed just a little bit older, but I think this idea of heaven and hell, good versus bad, black versus white, I mean that's a concept that kids as young as like 6 or 7 years old can understand. So if you're looking for kind of a bedtime story or a comic to share with your very young children, I think this one is right up there. But again, share with and discuss, because this isn't like My Little Pony or Dog Man or any of those where you can give it to a younger reader and just kind of turn them loose. I think this is one that engenders conversations. You want to start those conversations, talk about being responsible and good, what's good behavior, what's bad behavior, that sort of thing. I think this would very much suit the bill. So really enjoy it. You get a chance to check it out?
I did read it, yeah, and I don't have much to add. It's just it continues, just really great storytelling. It's really great storytelling, and I agree, you nailed it. It's perfect for younger readers and even older readers, because to be quite blunt, one of the reasons why I continue to read comics is that I like to be. Sometimes it's the simplest lessons that I need reminding of. What's good, what's bad, what's evil, what's not, the struggle we all have between our stresses, our anxieties, and everything else. And at the heart, it's being good or being bad is always a choice. And that's what Hornsby and Halo really is all about. And the fact that they're children doesn't necessarily change the choices that they make, because the choices we make to be good or bad exist regardless of age. But it's nice that it's disguised as an innocent, easy read that's for all ages.
Yeah, 100%. This is an example of how you act when you're not listening to those little devils on your shoulder, like we were just talking about for the previous comment.
Or those lucky devils, yes.
Yeah, exactly. All right, up next we have Dust to Dust. We're up to issue number 4. This is from writers J.G. Jones and Phil Brom. J.G. Jones handles the art, and Jackie Marzin on the letters. I know you've been enjoying this from the start, Rocky. What are your thoughts?
Well, I found that issue 4 here, this is definitely going to be something that reads better as a trade, because it's slow going, but it is really good. It is really good, and it just so happens because I have all the previous ones digitally. I'm actually up to speed on all of this, and I really like the way the story has developed. It's definitely going to read better as a trade. The art is absolutely fantastic. By the art by J.G. Jones, and J.G. Jones and Phil Bram are the writers. This continues the story. We learn something about Sheriff Meadows, that there is this killer in this sort of small, I guess, Midwestern town in the U.S. during the 1930s, and we learned something about the sheriff. We learned that he basically was involved with. He was. Coming out of World War I, he maybe was an alcoholic. He drank too much, and as a sheriff, a young girl came into the sheriff's department for help, and the person that was actually the perpetrator or the I guess the pedophile came in, pretended to be the uncle, and took the girl right out of the sheriff's station, and she ended up being killed. And the Sheriff Meadows was sort of blamed for it, blamed for incompetence and blamed for it. And it's hinted that maybe Sheriff Meadows eventually found this killer and killed him. But so it's Sheriff Meadows. We know that he's got maybe a checkered past, or maybe we know he's a badass. He's got a darker side to him. He doesn't suffer fools lightly. We know that he was he had some some bad experiences in World War One, but we know that he's used to seeing horrible things and dealing with horrible people. Um, and Sarah, the photographer from the big city, she's there. Just as this drought is continuing to engulf this city, we have different solicitors in the city trying to sell essentially cloud seeding technology, or like basically shooting dry ice. Potassium iodide out of a cannon. In the 1920s, they had cloud seeding where they'd shoot something, and it's actually to this day we have it, but shooting basically dry ice into the sky to sort of facilitate rain, and that's something that they're trying to sell that to the locals, and they're trying to. They're trying to do that. Meanwhile, the sheriff wants to. He's concerned that the Olsen family was killed in issue one. He's still trying to find the killer of that. Meanwhile, while he's investigating that, we get little hints and other things going on. That the mayor is concerned about Sheriff Meadows. Sarah's concerned about him. They're concerned about, what's the town going to think? Is there really a killer on the loose? And so, and then in a very interesting fashion, at one point the sheriff runs into this sort of middle-aged black man who is a survivor of the Tulsa massacre in 1921, which I think is, it's not explained, but I mean, if you know anything about American history, the Tulsa massacre was like a massacre of where it wiped out essentially a whole black community that was like the Black Wall Street of early 1920s America. They were wiped out, and a survivor of the Tulsa massacre is actually the brainchild. He's actually responsible for creating the technology, the cannon of the cloud seeding, but because he's black, they don't want to advertise that he's the one that's really behind it. So the brothers, the people that are soliciting, trying to sell this cloud seeding in town are actually it's the product of this young black man's intelligence. Anyways, we have that going on. The sheriff meets him, talks to him, and then we have got some more sort of one of the sellers of the cannon is sleeping with there's some little premarital sex going on between some characters, some guy cheating on his fiance in the midst of this character that shows up at the end that we believe is supposed to be the killer. And so there's lots going on. I'm intrigued by it. I'm going to say the pacing is a little wonky. It's some of the transitions I think are a little bit, sometimes a little bit, I think they could be smoother, but I'm invested enough in the story, and like I said, I'm familiar enough with it that it's still I really want to know how this ends, and I'm pulled into the story. And boy, oh boy, this is one where I want to buy. I hope it comes out as a nice oversized hardcover, because I'd want to own this as a hardcover, quite frankly, because it'll be as much as I'm enjoying it now. I know I would enjoy it even more just sitting down and reading it from end to end. But I thought it was really good. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. The transitions in this issue aren't as good as they've been in the past, and this is this is one of those down issues. There's not any big event that happens. I've talked about this a lot. You can't have the big events and the big story beats if you don't have some issues where things are a little slower paced and kind of a downbeat, if you will, kind of like a roller coaster, right? Everything can't be up at the top all the time. You need the contrast, you need the up and down. And this is one where we're kind of in the down. That being said, it's still entertaining, as you said, a lot of moving parts, and it's one of those issues where it feels like J.G. Jones and Phil Brom are putting all the pieces in place to give us a big payoff next issue with a lot of action. So we'll see how that plays out. I continue to love the use of color that J.G. Jones is using. Everything's, bleached out. Everything's kind of sepia tone. It gives that washed out look of the sun having bleached everything. And so then when you do get the flashes of color, they land with that much more impact based on that art. So gorgeous, highly recommended. Definitely should be reading it, everybody. Okay, up next, Seasons. We're up to issue 3. This is from writer Rick Remender with art by Paul Azaceta, colors by Mateus Lopez, and letters by Russ Wooten. I know this is another one that's high on your list, so give us your thoughts on it.
Well, season three, this is I love the first two issues here. The setup was just excellent. I particularly love last issue where we got a really good in-depth look. I think, despite it only being one issue, of all the sisters of the four seasons, fall, winter, spring, whatever, and uh, they're the seasons, and all of these sisters, their parents, we know something happened to their parents in the past, and we know that while their children, while the parents are have been killed or are missing, we know that there's this mysterious carnival that's in this town. We know one of the sisters is sent a message warning Spring, the sister Spring, about this carnival and what might be coming. And Autumn has warned Spring, and Spring lives in a house with Winter, and Spring is trying to tell Winter, to warn Winter that we should prepare, something's amiss here. These strange carnival dressed people they want something from us. And even at one point in this particular issue, they actually break into the house, and naturally, just the way it works out, Spring is the only one who witnesses the break-in, and Winter, her sister, who is very cynical. She's sort of the cynical, narcissistic, sort of egocentric artsy type. She just can't. She doesn't believe her sister. She finds her younger sister, and she finds Spring annoying, and they don't. While they love each other, their relationship is somewhat dysfunctional, and not somewhat, probably a lot. Rick Remender does a really good job sort of scripting that, the relationship between these two. Because that's a difficult thing to pull off in a comic book. How do you show that two characters love each other while at the same time can't stand each other, and they have their own idiosyncrasies of character that drive each other nuts, but they're still family, they're still sisters, they still lost their parents, they still have their own insecurities, and all that shines through so well. And it's even magnified by artist Paul Azaceta's art. Just sort of really re-influences that. Matias Lopez's colors are excellent. But this issue is largely just Spring sort of going through town again. She basically gets fired because at the beginning, the first issue where she's chasing a letter, chasing a letter that was ultimately discovered to be from her sister Autumn, warning her about this carnival. She screwed up delivering the other letters, and as a consequence of that, looks like she's lost her job. Meanwhile, she has to tell that to her sister Winter in this issue, only to ultimately have their home broken into, but Winter never witnessed it, and so she thinks that Spring is making this all up, and the issue just essentially ends with Winter kicking Spring out of the house, saying, "I've had enough of you. I'm taking you to boarding school." So it's again, you can see the frustration of Spring, and I'm even frustrated as a reader. It felt a little bit, maybe it felt a little forced that Winter never heard anything or doesn't believe Spring. I was frustrated for Spring, but that just goes to show how invested I was in the story itself. But I continue to enjoy this, and it's really good. It feels, I know it's cliche to say, but it feels like a really sort of a quasi-adventurous late night Netflix drama that I would binge watch with my wife. So I enjoy it, and we're only 3 issues in. But what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, the sense of whimsy isn't quite so pronounced in this issue. It's something that really we saw quite a bit in the first 2 issues. So I'm a little curious about that. This one felt a little more grounded, a little more down to earth, but that's okay. Again, it's the contrast between the two, and when we get to see a little bit more of the circus and the circus performers, and learn more about the circus, we'll probably see more of that, because you mentioned these two that break into the house. We see the one that she manages to lasso and capture. He turns into almost like this elf-like creature and sort of turns the tables and escapes and says, I'll be back, and next time things aren't going to go quite so well for you, and what have you. So I did like the interaction between the two sisters. Very interesting, very telling. It provides a lot of context and characterization. Even though Winter's much older than Spring, it's clear that Spring is, more responsible and much more the adult in the relationship, so to speak, as opposed to Winter, who just sort of wants to lock herself away and ignore the challenges that they're facing. Also, their character designs by Paul Azaceta, Spring being very brightly colored, Winter being colored in cooler tones, even down to her lipstick and her eyeshadow being blue. It's really great, kind of informs the way they come across and sort of their attitudes as well. So uh, uh, there's important events and there's important context that happens in this issue. But just like I was saying with Dust to Dust, you have those peaks and valleys. And this feels a little bit like a valley in terms of there's more characterization here than there's actually forward momentum in the plot. And that's not a criticism. We need the characterization. If you want me to buy in later when Spring and Winter and perhaps Autumn and Summer as well, when they return, if you want me to buy in and care when they're endangered by the circus, I have to know who they are as characters. I have to be invested. I have to like them, relate to them, what have you. So you need these kind of issues where you get characterization and you get context into how the characters relate to each other so that I can care and I can buy into the relationship and the decisions they make, as it pertains to each other when they're perhaps fighting for their life or trying to escape from the circus or whatever. I mean, we don't know where the story's going to go. But it's important to have these issues where maybe you're not getting as much forward momentum in the plot because we're focused on developing the characters so that later when we need the plot to move faster and you don't necessarily have time for those character moments, we don't forget why we care about these characters, right? Like, it's something that Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil run specifically is a perfect example of that, where early in the run you got a lot of character work, and then as the event started ramping up, there wasn't time for character work. But it didn't matter because we had the character work early and we had that foundation, and we knew who Matt Murdock was, Chip Zdarsky's version of him. And so he could go at a breakneck pace with action after action after action. So it's important when we're talking about how you structure stories and what have you. So yeah, recommend Seasons, but I am looking forward to a little return to whimsy at some point, maybe when we see the circus in a little more detail, because that sequence in the first issue where Spring is chasing that letter is just so fantastic. It's so expertly done. All right. Up next, we have Radiant Black number 32. This is from credits page. Sorry, everybody. Probably in the back. But it's from writer Kyle Higgins, Eduardo Ferragamo on cover, or the colors, or the art, I should say. Sorry, just bear with me. No, there we go. Here it is. I forgot Joe Clark is helping him co-write. See, good thing I found it. So Kyle Higgins and Joe Clark credited as the writers. Eduardo Ferragamo with Marcelo Costa credited as artists. Colors by Rod Fernandez and letters by Becca Carey. So a little recap at the very beginning, talking about the Catalyst War, how that all played out. Was a big event that came to a head last year in Radiant Black, and now we're dealing with the fallout, which I appreciate. We talked about it when we talked about issue 31 when it came back in February. How this isn't just, okay, alien invasion, and now it's over and things are just back to the way they were. No, there's wreckage, there's giant robots laying around downtown Chicago, and we see here there's alien weaponry that people have managed to get their hands on as well, that Radiant Black has to deal with making sure that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands or people using it irresponsibly. Beyond that, what Marshall is dealing with, Marshall, who's now the only one who's wielding the Radiant, as Nathan's given it up and gone back to California, he's dealing with the fact that during the Catalyst War, when he and Nathan traveled to that alternate Earth, so during the Catalyst War, the story and kind of the universe of Radiant Black split into two. And in one reality, Marshall had the Radiant, and was the Radiant Black, and in the other, Nathan was. And so in the reality where Marshall had the Radiant, he failed to stop the Catalyst War. He was unsuccessful, and a lot of people died. And so when Nathan and Marshall traveled over there and saw that, it really was a wake-up call for Marshall that, self doubt and whatever. But also, they had the other Radiants there with them, and so when they escaped back to the reality where Nathan had the Radiant, they brought as many survivors as they could with them. It wasn't a lot of people, less than 100, but those survivors remember Marshall being Radiant Black, and they remember Marshall failing, and millions, if not billions, of people dying because of it. So now in this reality, what Marshall's having to deal with is those survivors that came over here and are now on forums and social media and whatever, and they're denouncing Marshall, saying, you're not a good guy, you're selfish, you fail, you're going to get people killed and whatever. And he's trying to deal with that because, again, he saw that. He saw firsthand the failures of the other universes, Marshall. So it's a lot for him. He certainly has grown as a character and becoming more responsible, wanting to be the best hero that he can be. But he's still Marshall at the end of the day. So he still has his hang-ups. He still has his foibles. He's still looking for acceptance in a lot of ways, especially in a romantic partner. We get to see him go on a date in this particular issue. But beyond that, we get to see action, and we get to see Marshall being Marshall and battling to try to do the right thing and cracking smart remarks while doing it. And it's funny because, as I said, him wanting acceptance and wanting to find a romantic partner, and he has zero luck as Marshall. Zero. Especially with people, people are more calling out Radiant Black. They don't necessarily know that it was Marshall. And so what he does, because he can't get a date as Marshall, he creates a dating profile as Radiant Black, and then he immediately gets like 4,000 women that want to go on a date with him. And he actually ends up going on a ton of dates, and we get to see that on this page with a bunch of panels and to varying degrees of success. But then we get one that we kind of focus on, and it seems to be going well, and she's seems to be really excited by what he does, and she's like, take me somewhere dangerous, show me what you can do, whatever. And he's kind of reluctant because there is an emergency he needs to get to, but again, it's Marshall, so he goes ahead and gives in, and then as soon as he starts flying away, she's like screaming and freaking out. And he's like, yeah, this is not going to work out. I'll call you later. And he drops her off, and you can see she's all shell-shocked there as Marshall goes to deal with the latest demands his attention. So this is just such a fantastic book. It's a breath of fresh air. If you want to think of something like early Spider-Man with kind of the responsibility, but feeling overwhelmed. If you want to talk about something like Invincible, where it's a young hero who's extremely powerful, but dealing with really, really powerful foes and trying to juggle a lot of different things, work-life balance and all that, this is going to fit the bill as well. If you're a big fan of Power Rangers, you're going to see some similarities. Obviously, Kyle was one of the ones that helped bring the Power Rangers series over at IDW back to prominence. So if you're a fan of any of those types of stories, you're going to really love this, and I definitely recommend it. You can pick up issue 31 and then this issue 32 and kind of hit the ground running. It is a good jumping on point. That being said, I encourage you to go back and pick up the trades. And I think there's an omnibus now of the first 30 issues that you can get. But yeah, I definitely encourage you to pick those up and read it, because there's some big twists and turns. The way Kyle told it, especially early on, was they wanted to take really big swings if they were going to do this, and they did. They took really big swings, and a lot of times it resulted in a home run. The series has been doing really, really well. It has a really loyal following, and there's even an audio drama version of the first volume coming later this year with some really well-known voice actors voicing Marshall and Nathan, so look for that as well. But yeah, I'm a big fan of the series. The art has been consistent throughout, with Marcelo Costa handling the majority of it, and Eduardo Ferragato. Their styles are very, very similar. I would even struggle probably to tell their styles apart, if I were to see them side by side. But they're both super, super talented, and yeah, love Radiant Black, and it's got a great community. Radiant Black fans, Black Market Narrative fans are a really fun bunch, and they're very loyal as well. So, anything to add, Rocky?
No, I don't have much to add. I never had a chance to read this issue. Like I said, I'm behind. I'm just only one issue behind. I got to catch up. But I agree. It's a great series, and I'm looking forward to reading it later this week. I should be able to get to it.
Yeah, definitely a great issue. All right, so this one we're taking everyone down with us. We had Matthew Rosenberg on the show not too long ago, right before Final Order cutoff, to talk about it. First issue is finally out. You should definitely check in your local area to see if Matthew Rosenberg is going to be around. He's doing a signing tour. This, along with another book we're going to talk about that came out from Image today, "You'll Do Bad Things" from Tyler Crook, also came out today. Matthew and Tyler are very close friends. They did Four Kids Walk Into a Bank together. They're doing What's the Furthest Place from Here, the other Image series that they collaborate on that's currently coming out. And so, yeah, they're going on a signing tour. I think all across the United States are going to do signings. So if you want to get a chance to meet him, get your book signed, just make sure you're following him on social media. Ashcan Press. Just do a Google search for Ashcan Press. You'll find him. But his book is finally out, and it's really fantastic. He is the writer. Stefano Landini on art. Colors by Roman Titoff and Jason Wordie. Letters by Hassan Otsman Elhau. Designed by Becky Perry. Just really, really fantastic. Again, I got a chance to talk to Matthew about it. Encourage you to go check out that interview. But I know you had a chance to read it, Rocky, as well. So let's get your thoughts.
Yeah. Uh, I thought this was. I thought this was really, really good. I listened to your interview with Matthew Rosenberg, and Matthew Rosenberg has been hit and miss with me over at DC, but I've really been enjoying his DC v Vampires, and he certainly talked with a great deal of passion about this particular series and sort of the inspirations he had leading into it. This is the story of a young girl by the name of Annalise, who sort of lives secluded on an island, and she desires to have a better relationship with her father. And the issue starts off where she seems to be upset. She's running away, and her fathers have sent basically robots after her to find her because she's all upset. She wants her dad to play hide and seek with her, and so right away you think, oh, this is a father-daughter tale and what have you, and you can infer almost immediately that her father's likely a scientist and a very intelligent man, but probably someone who lacks the emotional type of capacity to really bond with his daughter, which is not uncommon for some fathers, I suppose. But then it quickly becomes the central conceit of the issue and of the concept of the series is her father is the Vitruvian, who is essentially this Earth's supervillain. It's implied, and he's like the supervillain, and the good guys are members of something called the Veil, and. The Vitruvian, Annalise's father calls her his starfish, and he basically wants to, he wants to protect her, while at the same time he wants to sort of like keep his secrets. He doesn't want her to. Obviously, she's a growing young girl, but you could tell. I mean, at what point do you tell your daughter, "Oh, by the way, I'm a big deal. I'm really, really smart, and I want to build a better world for you. But every time I try to build a better world for you, somebody stops me, and that's the members of this Veil." And through the course of the story, Annalise stumbles upon playing hide and seek with her father. She stumbles upon a prisoner that her father has. He captured a bunch of fishermen that found his location, and he believes one of them is a spy for the Veil trying to find his location. And ultimately, Annalise, he ends up killing, because he is a villain, he ends up killing this particular prisoner who tries to manipulate Annalise into helping him escape. And Annalise ultimately ends up having a pretty big heart-to-heart with her dad, where he basically admits that, yes, he killed this man, yes, this, yes, that. And Annalise has got a lot to think about. But at one particular point, Annalise, this particular prisoner had a communication device, basically consisting of just a glorified button, and Annalise, the Vitruvian, wanted to make sure that his daughter Annalise did not push that button because it could contact I guess the veil to come and look for him, and she lies to her father by saying that she never pushed the button. But and then we're sort of introduced to some of the agents of the veil, and they're very and it's just really it's actually quite something because the agents of the veil, the guy looks like Burt Reynolds, the main agent of the veil, and there's a lot of, it's very provocative. He's almost like a clumsy drug addicted James Bond character who's high and doing all these drugs, and he's having sex with his glorified version of Moneypenny. It seems like it's a very eclectic array of characters in this world where we I mean, I can't help but love the Vitruvian, and I love Annalise. I love their dynamic as father and daughter, as dysfunctional as it is. And then I also love the agents of the Veil, who seem to be crazy and off the rocker a little bit in their own right. And we know that these two forces are going to be coming to a head at some point. And I also know from your interview with Matthew Rosenberg that the central hint of the story is Annalise's struggle, because this story ends on a hell of a cliffhanger, where there's a huge explosion, and what's the consequence of that? We don't know. Has somebody been hurt? Has somebody been killed? I don't know, but I got to tell you, for an opening issue, this was really, really good, and I'm glad I had some time to read it because this was the last issue I read today. There were some delays before we got started on this podcast, and I'm glad for that because it allowed me the opportunity to read it, and I was really impressed with it. And I have to say, the art. I want to give a shout out to the artist. Sorry, uh,
Tyler.
sorry, Stefano Landini,
Yeah.
art is fantastic, and Roman Titov and Jason Wardy on the colors, Hassan Osman Alho on the letters, very very well done. I'm definitely. I wish I could say I don't know if this was on my pull list, so I'll have to get my retailer to back order it, and hopefully if it's sold out, I'll be able to get a second printing.
Yeah, we sort of know from solicits and interviews Matthew's given. Yeah, the Vitruvian, he hasn't come out and said that he's dead necessarily, but he appears to be. He appears to be, and Annalise really has a choice here. She can live a normal life for the first time, with the help of this robot that her father programmed to take care of her in the event of his demise, or she can go out and try to get revenge. And the fact that the name of the book is we're taking everyone down with us, you kind of understand which path she's going to choose, and that's kind of what Matthew said when I interviewed him. But yeah, really interesting. I'm sure she's going to take her revenge. I never noticed that agent looking like Burt Reynolds, but now that you said that, like, I can't help but look at it. There are several pages here where I can't show, as Rocky
I thought it
said.
was Smokey and the Bandit. Yeah.
Yeah, as Rocky says, pretty provocative and what have you. So definitely for mature readers. But yeah, he's enjoying himself. He's enjoying his lead. We'll just leave it at that. So yeah, I recommend it. It is a great start. It's a handful as far as a title goes. We're taking everyone down with us. But it's definitely worth your time. A little bit of a James Bond vibe as well. With
It's cool. It's really good.
Yeah,
It's enjoyable.
Members of the agency. But I love that it's a story that's being told from the perspective of the like a James Bond villain's daughter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And can't blame her for the actions of her parent, but yet she seems like she's going to follow that same path. Definitely be at odds with the agency. So we'll see. All right. Up next, the aforementioned "You'll Do Bad Things" from Tyler Boss. I might have said Tyler Kirk earlier. Tyler Boss. He's the one that's friends with Matthew Rosenberg. Yeah, I think I did say Tyler Kirk, but yeah, Tyler Boss. He's the one that's done things like Four Kids Walk into a Bank and what have you with Matthew Rosenberg. The art here is by Adriana Turtolici, lettering by Hassan Otsman Elhau, designed by Dylan Todd rather. It's from the Tiny Onion imprint. It is a horror story. Really interesting color work that they give. I'm a little unsure of what's real and what's not here, to be honest with you. It does feel very much like a character piece. Feels like a little bit set in the 70s. A little bit of a slasher film, as it were. Because we see this young couple on a date. The female invites the male up to her apartment. He says no. Then he's killed in his car by this guy with a knife, and then the guy goes inside the building, which tells me that maybe he took her out as well. But then we shift and we we meet this author who is talking to his publisher or his agent or somebody, and she's asking for more pages. He's supposedly supposed to be writing a romance novel. In the meantime, she's talking, asking him about the latest copy of his book that she sent, the 10th anniversary copy of his best-selling book. And he's like, "Oh my God, is blood dripping on the cover? Do really need to do that?" So apparently, he's previously written true crime stories, and now he's trying to turn his career in a different direction. And we get some context on that when he's speaking to his sister and his nephew on the train, and he talks about he just wants to be happier. He wants to write some happy endings and make some stories up instead of investigating true crime and kind of living in a way kind of with the worst parts of humanity. But he struggles. He's like, I can never write a happy ending. Like, I'm writing these fictional characters and things always go bad. And then it seems like we're getting one of the stories that he's writing with these two gentlemen talking in a bar. One of them had a daughter who apparently had been killed. It seems like she was murdered. Maybe that's kind of how it ties in to what this writer Seth has been doing previously or what have you. And it seems like he's trying to write a romance story between these two guys when all of a sudden a killer shows up. And then he gets up from his computer and walks away, but the story continues. So is this something he writes later? Is it something that's actually happening? Is he in some way writing the future, or is he channeling of current events as they're happening without realizing they're happening? Because when the police go and investigate this bar, they find the guy like stuffed into, I think it's a fridge that he's like chopped up and stuffed into.
Yeah, it's a fridge. Yeah,
yeah. So you talk about fridging refrigerator women or whatever. There's a guy gets stuffed. The bartender gets stuffed into the fridge at his own restaurant. So I'm not sure what to. It definitely is intriguing and interesting with the question of, is this real? Is this something that was being written in the story? Like I have no idea, but the art is really slick in terms of the way it's colored, makes it look very, very unique. It's well paced, and it kind of hooked me on the first issue. So not really sure. You'll Do Bad Things. I mean, is this guy writing the stories? And then it's influencing people to do the things that he's writing. So, he's like not realizing it. Is that what the title means? You'll do bad things? Like if I type up bad things in my fictional stories, then people are going to go out and do those? Like I have no idea. But it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's ironic that he desires a happy ending, but he doesn't.
Yeah, he
doesn't
can't write one.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it really, really intriguing start. I can see this doing really, really well. Anything else to add?
No, I mean, you pretty much said it. I just, I didn't read it as thoroughly as you did, but I'm definitely going to read it because it sounds like something that's very intriguing. As I like being challenged, where, like you said, sometimes you don't really know what's real and what isn't, and that's where you really see the artist gets to shine through. Whenever you're dealing with how much is misdirection, how much is imagining, how much is maybe just what's when you don't really know what's going on, and you get, especially if it's half of it's in the writer's mind and half of it's outside. That's one thing about comic books. It's different. It's a visual medium that's different than watching a movie. And so I'm really curious. I want to scrutinize it more from panel to panel. I'll hopefully have time before the weekend to do that.
Yeah, crazy book. All right. Up next, we have Big Burn #3 from Distillery, written by Joe Henderson, art by Lee Garbett, colors by Lee Lowridge, letters by Lucas Gattoni. Final issue, and I don't really want to talk too much about the story here. The story beats. It's enough to say that first issue, there are a couple that falls in love during a bank robbery. They're both trying to rob the same bank. They meet. They fall in love. They eventually get caught after a long crime spree of robbing banks and falling in love. And while they're in the paddy wagon heading to jail, the devil shows up and offers them their freedom in exchange for their souls. And, kind of time-honored story trope. But what they don't realize is without their souls, they lose the capacity to love. So they sort of have a falling out. They don't love each other anymore. So the devil shows up at one point. The guy is indebted to the mob because he took a loan from a loan shark to finance a job, and then because of their falling out, the woman goes and like checks herself into a facility um, because she doesn't understand why she can't feel anything anymore, and she doesn't think the devil was real. She thinks it was all imagined. Um, and so the guy can't pull the job without her help, and so he's on the hook for this money he took from the loan shark. So they show up and they kill him, and he meets the devil, and the devil explains how he is real and he does have the soul, and it's locked up in hell, and hell is a casino. Because what better way to give people false hope than to have them one dice throw or one roulette wheel or one hand of blackjack away from paying off their debt or winning their soul back or achieving happiness or some sort of goal, and then he gets to pull it away time and time again. And then this guy wakes up. So the mob enforcer, they kill the guy, but then they bring him back because it's like a warning, right? Like, if you don't get us our money, next time you'll be dead for good. So when this guy realizes the devil's real, he recruits a crew, and they're going to try to break into hell and steal their souls back. Now, that's high stakes because you got to be dead, right? Like, you got to have somebody kill you. You have to pull off the heist in a very quick fashion so your body can be revived, so they can bring you back to life. So based on those stakes, you got to have somebody that's invested. So they have to go and recruit other people that have sold their soul to the devil. It's not exactly the best crew. So that was kind of the second issue. So the third issue, we get the actual heist. Again, I don't want to spoil. They all, get themselves killed. They had like this supposed medical student or something comes in there and kills them. He's ready to revive them, at a predetermined time. And they all go to hell, and they're sort of in their own different environments in hell, all seeing something different. They've got to manipulate events and see if they can get out. So again, I'm not going to spoil whether they're able to do it or not, or how successful they are. I did enjoy the story, but I do have to admit that this was one of those where the journey for me was better than the final destination in a way. Like, I enjoyed the character work is great. I'm a big fan of Joe Henderson. Super talented. I love Lee Garbett's art, but it wasn't like the biggest, surprise ending or super impactful or whatever. It was the journey to get there that I enjoyed the most. But what also struck me when I was done reading it was, and again, Joe Henderson, he was the showrunner for Lucifer. He's worked in television. He worked on White Collar for a long time, if people are familiar with that show. And what I got finished with, and I haven't ever felt like this with his previous two comic projects, Skyward and Shadecraft. But with this one, I finished reading it, and I was like, oh man, do I want this to be a TV show? Not a movie. I want it to be a TV show. I want to have a good 20 to 30 hours of this playing out over a season or two, with a chance to flesh out the characters and see the heist and whatever. Because when it comes to a heist, that's something that's so hard to do in a comic with static images. You think about like the best heist movies, like the Ocean's franchise, and another one of my favorite heist movies is it's got Robert De Niro in it and Edward Norton, and I'm drawing a blank on it. I can't remember what it's called. I'll have to look it up in a minute. And there's another one with Gene Hackman and Danny DeVito that's called The Heist.
Yeah.
Delroy Lindo.
Italian Heist is pretty good.
Yeah,
Italian Job.
Italian Job. Yeah, that's another one that's really, really good. The Score is the one I'm thinking of that has Robert De Niro and Ed Norton, and it has Marlon Brando in his last screen role as well. And so that one's fantastic as well. But the point being that there's things you can do in live action that you can't do in comics. And as much as I love this story as a comic book story, I think there's so much you could do with it, especially this final issue. It's just begging to be adapted. So I hope at some point we get to see it on the small screen. So did you get a chance to read this? I know that you read the first two issues.
No, I haven't. I'm actually looking forward to it. I really like it. I particularly love the cover of the cover A of the second issue, but I haven't gotten the third issue yet. I'm anxious to pick it up at my comic shop this week. So
Yeah, definitely recommend it, everybody. All right, up next we have The Mummy. This is from writer-artist Faith Erin Hicks, and it has colors by Lee Lowridge, letters by Hassan Otsman Elhau. It's not completely faithful, but pretty faithful to the original Mummy story, but not focused on him that much in the first issue. We actually meet this girl named Helen. Her father's British, her mother is Egyptian. They talk about the British being in Egypt and excavating these, digging in the ground, trying to find treasures, trying to understand the ancestors, what have you. And Hicks does a good job of giving us the context for this girl Helen, as we have the first few pages in 1912 in Thebes, and then we jump forward to 1921, and Helen wants to be friends with kind of the children of the servants that work for her father, but there's obviously a class divide there. So we get some context, we get her inner thoughts, and we see them spending some time together in some of kind of the nighttime areas of Thebes. But then they're sort of chased out of the nightclub, and she ends up going out onto the sand with a little boy, and then supposedly the curse of the mummy hits, and we see the mummy for the first time. She wakes up in kind of a dream state, if you will, and is not quite sure what she sees. She passes out again, and then she's found, and this is out at the dig site. She's found by her father. He's obviously concerned, saying, "Your mother's terrified." They go back to the house, and she's sort of read the riot act, and they tell her, "What are you doing?" She's like, "I'm just trying to spend time with my friends." "Those aren't your friends. Those are not people you should be spending your time with." And her father's like, "This is not how the British act, prim and proper, especially for a young woman." And he forbids her to see any of those people again, those other children, teenagers. And she's like, "That isn't fair." He doesn't care. And when she tries to plead with her mother for help, he just says, "You have to respect your father and do as he says. This is what you're being British is everything to your father, and this is what you must understand." So she runs up to her room, and she's kind of throwing things around and throwing a fit and really upset. And she breaks her mirror. And when she breaks her mirror, all of a sudden she sees kind of her fractured reflection. But there's one of the reflections that seems to come to life and talk to her, and it's like, "I don't remember who I am. Please help me. Can you tell me who I am and what have you?" And Helen's like, "This is all in my imagination. Wait, is this real? What have you?" And that's how it gets started with the mummy overlooking the town of Thebes on the very last page. And then there's a little bit of an essay here from Faith Erin Hicks talking about, which is fantastic, talking about his relationship with horror movies when he was younger, and how his father was a big movie buff, and they kind of shared the horror stories amongst each other. And then his father passing away just a few weeks before he started writing and drawing this story. So clearly very personal, or she rather, very personal story for her after her father died. So these Universal monster stories have met with varying degrees of success. This one seems like it's going to be pretty faithful to what we had in the original Curse of the Mummy movie, and Faith talks about that in her essay. So I do encourage you, if you're going to check this out, to read the essay, because it provides some context. I did find the art to be interesting. It's a very great art. Faith is a very talented artist, mostly known for Lumberjanes over at Boom. But it is a little bit of a clean style, and not necessarily what you'd expect for a horror story, as it were. Usually they tend to be colored a little darker, and sometimes the line work can be a little more muddy because you're using more shadow and you're trying to be foreboding and dark. And I like that this is not that. It gives it more of a clean feel. I feel a little more removed, and that's not always a good thing. But for this first issue, it's almost like we're observing, as opposed to putting myself in the shoes of Helen and what she's going through. So I appreciated that, and I think the main cover is fantastic as well. And yeah, even though it's the Mummy, we know almost nothing about the Mummy at this point in the story. But again, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah. I would just have to add, I remember reading this. It must have been in our preview thing I read this about 3 weeks ago. I read this a long time ago, like a solid 3 weeks ago. And I remember thinking like, I don't remember the original story of the mummy. Like, I don't remember the classic story itself, other than maybe what I saw in movies. And I don't know if that's the classic take or not, but I just remember this feeling different because it's from the perspective of a woman, from the girl, of the daughter of the family, that of the father who found maybe found the tomb or something. So I just found the perspective very different. This didn't feel like a classic mummy tale to me. But then what the hell do I know about the mummy?
Yeah.
That's what intrigued me about it. And I thought the art sort of reinforced that. The art really gave me a feel that I was back in the 20s there and back in time. It really worked for me. And I felt like I was in Egypt, or I felt like it felt really like perfect for that time period. And yeah, because this is actually on my pull list. So I was waiting. I don't know. Hope this should be on my pull list when I go to pick up my comics this week. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think the art is fantastic, and again, some like you said, something different than kind of the. There's so much horror content out now, and it sort of blends together. This will stand out if only for the style of art that Faith is using. All right, up next we have 8 of 8 for Standstill. This is from writer Lee Lowridge with art by Alex Regal, design and lettering by Rob Tweedy. Again, I've talked about this before when we cover this book. Because everything is double page spread, it's really hard to show how it presents digitally. Really a book that needs to be read physically. The other thing is that Andrew Robinson was the original artist, and then, unfortunately, the tragedy of him losing his home in the Eaton fire, Alex Regal took over, and it just doesn't have the same sort of really slick style that Andrew Robinson has, so I definitely miss his art. I think it just works better for the double page spread. That being said, I did enjoy the way that this wrapped up. It left it open for more. It felt authentic with the story and the stakes. I'm not going to get too much into the plot and what have you. Go and check it out for yourself. Pick up the trade that's going to contain all 8 issues. But I did enjoy this, and I hope Lee Lowridge, who's mostly known as a colorist, has been working in comics for decades, that he gets more of a chance to write his own stories, because I think he's a good storyteller. So I wanted to acknowledge this. I don't think it was quite as good as it could have been had Andrew Robinson drawn it all, but it's still a very good story, action-packed. If you're into sci-fi, time travel, that sort of thing, you'll definitely enjoy it. So check it out if you're so inclined. All right, last issue before Lore War here in the Star Trek IDW universe with Defiant number 25 from Christopher Cantwell. So another Christopher Cantwell book. We had one last week with Out of Alcatraz, which was just fantastic. Art here by Angel Unzeta, colors by Marisa Louise, letters by Clayton Cowles. A little bit of a catch-all issue. We have various things going on. But mostly what we see is Berlinghoff Rasmussen, who's one of my favorite Star Trek The Next Generation characters of all time, partly because he's portrayed in the Star Trek The Next Generation series by Matt Frewer, who a lot of people know as Max Headroom. He was the dad in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. He's just been in a ton of stuff. He's a fantastic actor, and he plays this character, Rasmussen, who came from sort of the dark times, right around the 25th century, I think, when a lot of records had been lost due to nuclear war. But a professor who is a student of history time travels back to Rasmussen's time. Rasmussen is a bit unscrupulous, a bit of a con man. He steals the guy's time machine, travels forward in time, eventually ends up on the Enterprise, pretends to be the professor, and he's stealing a bunch of stuff unbeknownst to the Enterprise crew. Because then he's going to use the time travel and go back in time and sell it. So yeah, the guy's a con man, and so he teams up here with somebody that we thought was dead, which is Namira Vondecht, who was a part of Worf's crew after they'd been disavowed, and she formerly was a member of kind of this space pirate crew. Originally, she was a combat medic, and she got disillusioned with the war and became kind of hooked on using her own medical supplies, and was discharged, dishonorably discharged. Ends up on the crew, and we thought that she had been killed. We find out how she survived with Rasmussen saving her, so they're running this con where they're basically Rasmussen pretends to be sick. They pretend not to know each other. Rasmussen pretends to be sick. She shows up and he's like, "Oh, it's this outbreak of this virus. I have the cure. It's very minimal cost." But they press their luck a little bit too much with trying to do too many planets, and it's become suspicious. So they're forced to kind of flee for their lives when they're found out. And as they're fleeing from the latest outpost, they stumble across the wave of disintegration, I guess we'll call it, that Lore has unleashed. We know that Lore is erasing the universe. He's going to have it remade, amongst his own wishes or what have you. And that's where it really becomes apparent that Rasmussen is much more intelligent than we've ever perhaps known before, when he finds a way to reconfigure the warp engines to run off the sort of antimatter that wave is composed of. Meanwhile, we have the rest of the crew of the Defiant, B'Elanna Torres and Ro Lauren and Chief O'Brien, finishing up their mission to take out some mines that O'Brien feels partly responsible. These automated mines are out on the front lines of an old battlefield and basically killing people. And so they get back to the Defiant just in time for Namira and Rasmussen to show up. And they're like, "Oh, you're alive? Like, what's going on?" She's like, "I don't have time to explain because there's this giant wave of antimatter, coming right behind us." And that's where the issue ends, on this cliffhanger, and it's to be continued in Lore Wars. So I've talked a lot about IDW Star Trek books this year and toward the end of last year, because more so than any Star Trek universe that I've ever read, it feels more like the television shows than ever. It feels episodic. It feels important. It feels like it matters in terms of Star Trek canon. We're seeing it's not the same old characters. It's more of widespread. And Rasmussen showing up here is a perfect example, right? He's in one episode of Star Trek Next Generation, but he's an interesting character. And Cantwell, pulls him out of the mothballs here and puts him into the story, and it makes sense, and it's expanding on who he is as a character. And like so many Star Trek comics that I used to read, because I used to read some of the DC stuff in the 80s, they felt episodic as well, but in a way where one didn't even feel connected to the other. Like, you'd read one issue, it was a one and done, didn't matter, then you were on to the next one and done. Like, there were no consequences, there were no stakes. Here we have the highest stakes of all, because the whole universe is being unmade, and the whole dynamic between Lore and Data is fantastic, whatever. So really looking forward to Lore War. Plus, look at this art by Angel Unzeta. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic.
That's really good.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's engaging on its own, and it's great color work, but they're also recognizable as the actors who play them, So it's really, really fantastic. So yeah, I have been digging on Star Wars. I've read every single issue of all the Star Wars books since IDW has kind of restarted them with Star Trek #1 from Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing back in, I think it was 2022, into the Day of Blood event, and now into Lore War. And really excited for what's to come.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Up next, we have Department of Truth, #29. This is from writer James Tynion, Martin Simmons on art, letters by Aditya Bidikar, designed by Dylan Todd. I don't have a whole lot to say about this issue because, again, this is one of those down issues. Department of Truth is basically a secret department of the government that kind of tries to manipulate reality in a way. So in this world that Tynion has created, if enough people believe something to be true, it becomes true. If enough people believe that Bigfoot exists, then Bigfoot will manifest. And so the Department of Truth is trying to manage that in a world with social media where, traditional media of television news and newspapers and all that have gone away. And they've had various iterations over the years based on, emerging technologies, computers, and all that sort of thing. So Meantime, one of their agents, his husband is a reporter, and Lee Harvey Oswald is he's the director of the Department of Truth. He's like way up on the totem pole, which is really interesting when we're talking about conspiracy theories, because at its heart, that's what this story is all about. That's what this series is all about, these conspiracy theories. So Lee Harvey Oswald tells Agent Cole, who is newly recruited to the Department of Truth in the first issue, he tells Agent Cole's husband the truth about everything, because Cole's husband suspects like what's going on, things that aren't adding up, or what have you, and Cole has to decide: did Lee Harvey Oswald, like he always does things purposefully? So what was the purpose in telling him? Is he going to have his husband killed? Is he trying to control the narrative? Again, because of the very nature of the story, you can never trust what somebody's saying. Are they saying it to tell you the truth? Are they saying it to manipulate something? Is what they're saying actually true? Are they trying to get enough people to believe it to make it true? I mean, Agent Cole's husband is a reporter. So what exactly is going on? That's one of the things that I love about the series, maybe the thing I love most. You never really can trust what people are saying or what their motivations are. And here, Hawk, who was an agent, kind of a field agent, I guess you would say, the number one field agent for the Department of Truth, he would go out, and when Bigfoot would manifest itself, or other cryptozoological creatures, Mothman or whatever, he would go out and kill them. So he was an agent, and their best agent, and he has sort of betrayed the Department of Truth and gone to work for another organization that used to be in the Soviet Union, but then with the collapse of the Soviet Union, they went out on their own. They're called Black Hat, and they're sort of the opposite of the Department of Truth in that they're trying to control the narrative so they can have the power. But Hawk has his own reasons for doing that. They're not completely clear at this point what they are, and Cole doesn't know if he can trust them or not. But while he's voicing in this issue to Hawk his concerns about his husband and why Lee Harvey Oswald might be telling the truth, what's really interesting, the other interesting thing about this book is how Tynion ties it in with real world events. He talks about, well, the last time they told the truth was because of Richard Nixon. And Nixon was so popular and so powerful, and they thought that he would perhaps be a president that could be president longer than just 8 years, and not to the point of being a king, but he started to really amass enough power that Lee Harvey Oswald got a little bit scared, because Nixon had used the Department of Truth to gain all this power. And then he thought that he was above them, and started doing things kind of off the book and without the recommendations. And it's hinted here that includes the Watergate break-in. And so the last time Lee Harvey Oswald told the truth was when he basically was the one that... It's intimated that he was Deep Throat, basically. He was the one that told the truth about Watergate and what have you. And
hilarious.
And broke Watergate, broke the story open, and told the truth, and that's led to Nixon's downfall. And if you know anything about the Watergate scandal, whatever, the White House tapes, when they went and listened during that time frame, whatever, there's 18 minutes of dead air at one point, 18 minutes of audio recording that's not accounted for. And we don't know what was said in those 18 minutes or whatever. But it's mentioned in this story that those 18 minutes are when Lee Harvey Oswald called Nixon and explained, hey, we brought you down because you got too big or whatever. And again, I love that these conspiracies and what have you, and how Tynion pulls them into the story and whatever. But this is not a book that you can pick. Like, if you haven't read Department of Truth, you can't pick up issue 29 and just read it and hit the ground running. You're going to be completely lost. It really is a series you have to read from the beginning. So I understand there's a little bit of a barrier to entry, but I feel like it's worth it. And, you know, much like Tynion's Nice House series, where it's big, large cast of characters, really big ideas that you're going to be thinking about for a long time after you read it. That's what this is going to be. But I think Nice House does work a little better episodically than Department of Truth does. Like, this is, and I've been thinking about this book a lot since I read it over the weekend. But I really think the entirety of Department of Truth is going to read much better as a collected edition, whatever that might be, right? If it ends up like being 10 volumes, let's say, and to read it sort of consecutively over a period of a month, let's say, I think it really is going to pay off a lot more. And I say that not knowing how many issues Tynion has planned or how long it's going to go or how it's going to end, it's going to pay off or not. But that's the sense I get because it's so big and it ties into real world events with characters like JFK and Marilyn Monroe and Richard Nixon and all that. It's really interesting and really fun and a fantastic idea. So I do recommend checking it out. Bitterroot comes back this week as well. Eisner Award, which won 2 Eisners. It's back with its latest volume. First volume was 16 issues, set in the Harlem Renaissance with this Sangir family who are basically monster hunters. So now we jump forward. Now we're in the civil rights movement of the 60s. So this is from creators David F. Walker, Chuck Brown, and Sanford Green. Sanford handling the art, David and Chuck handling the majority of the writing, Sanford obviously contributing to the plot as well. Matt Herms on colors, Hassan Otsman Elhau on letters. Just like I was saying, tying into real world things with Department of Truth. The Harlem Renaissance was the setting, 1920s into the early 30s for the first volume, and now the second volume we're dealing with the civil rights movement and the belief for the majority of people that the monsters that the Sangir family and their allies were fighting against have been vanquished. They no longer exist, and they're not believing that they exist, but clearly they do. When this bus of civil rights activists and freedom writers are all killed, but just like the first volume of Bitterroot, where amongst the fighting the monsters, we had the family and to some extent their allies fighting amongst themselves at times as well, because they didn't always agree on sort of the best way forward and how they should be handling things and what the general public should know. And then you have the whole thing of them being people of color in late 20s and early 30s, where there was still a lot of bigotry and racism. I mean, there still is, but even more of it back then. Now we're setting it in the 60s in the civil rights movement in 1964. So again, a very volatile time for black culture and what have you. So there's a reason that this book won Eisners, and it hits the ground running with this time jump forward as well. So I do recommend it. You don't necessarily have to go back and read the first volume, the first 16 issues. I think they're collected in 3 trades. But you will get more out of this if you do go back. And those are fantastic reads as well. And I feel like Sanford Green's art, it's gotten a little tighter. I mean, you do see a little bit of ink splash here and there. But, if you compare this against the first issue of the first volume, I feel like this is much tighter. And so I don't know if that's purposeful, if he's doing tighter lines and what have you. But I do appreciate it. I really like the art in this issue more so than some of the art in the first volume. So, did you read any of the first volume of Bitterroot, Rocky?
No, I've never read any of Bitterroot. No.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you should definitely dip your toe in, because like I said, it won an Eisner for Best Ongoing Series. I think it was 2021 and 2023, I believe it won. So, anyway, it's back for a whole new with a whole new generation. Next Movement. I love that title as well. So check it out if it sounds interesting to you.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. Free for All is also out this week from Oni Press. I'm not going to talk about it too much. It's from Patrick Horvath, and if you're wondering why that name sounds familiar, Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, kind of the breakout hit of the last couple years from IDW. This is a digital comic that he put out long before that. It's coming out through Oni Press. They did a Zoop campaign on it as well. So he wrote it and he draws it, and it's a really interesting story. When it was had its Zoop campaign, I interviewed Patrick. You can go and look that up and listen to it. And it's basically this idea in the future where society has decided that nobody should be a billionaire. And if you're a billionaire, you need to give half your money away to help society. Give half your money away to the powers that be, to the government, so they can use that money to help those less fortunate. If you don't want to do that as a billionaire, your other option is you can go and fight in the free-for-all. And it's basically this gladiatorial arena where you're fighting for your life. You can be killed. If you're killed, then you give up half your money and your estate gets the other half. If you survive, you get to keep all your money. So how important is your money to you? That's what this story is asking. And, again, it's haves and have-nots in politics and whatever. So it's definitely worth your time. It's about 100 pages, 106 pages, I think. I don't know if I don't think it's available on the Zoop page anymore. I think they sold out. But Patrick is a fantastic storyteller, and we hit it off from the first time I interviewed him, and it's fantastic to see all his success with Beneath the Trees. And this has similar sensibilities. So if you like Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees, you're going to like this. Definitely recommend that you pick it up.
Well, we almost had Elon Musk versus Mark Zuckerberg in a boxing match, didn't we?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
is that what, I wonder if that was the inspiration for this.
Yeah, this was long before. I think this came out in the late 2010s.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, Musk versus Zuckerberg, I don't think it was to the death. Especially if one of them would have had to donate all the money to charity had they lost.
Yeah.
But anyway,
they could afford it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, this is definitely worth your time. Check it out if you're so inclined. All right. Last book we're going to talk about is one I actually didn't read. I didn't even realize it was by Garth Ennis. It's a one-shot. It's called The Kids. Ennis is the writer. Art is by Dalibor Talajic, whose art I'm familiar with. And Stefan Petrolik handles the colors, with Rob Steen on letters and production. Again, I know nothing about this, Rocky, but I know you read it, so give us the lowdown.
Well, it's called The Kids, and for those who aren't watching this on the Comic Source YouTube channel, The Kids is in children's building block letters, The Kids, and basically it takes place in some place in America. It's really non-specified, and it involves a family, Alexa, her husband Leo, and they got two sons. They got a son named Matt and an infant child named Ivan, and there's a local woman in their neighborhood by the name of Mrs. Skilling, and she's kind of considered like the witch because she's known by the kids around town that she doesn't like children. And in any event, one day this is a one shot. This is a one shot, and it's 50 pages long, and basically it's all of a sudden two or three pages in, boom. Oh my God, Alexa and Leo are woken up because their infant child, they think their infant child, Ivan's crying. But wait a minute, that's not Ivan. That can't be Ivan. They go into Ivan's room and there's this grown naked man, sort of crying like a baby. And they panic and they think they're being invaded and chaos ensues. So they run outside their house and Leo is pushed to the ground by this giant man, and they go outside and the entire neighborhood's in chaos. And what's going on? Well, every infant child has instantly become an adult everywhere. And the chaos ensues that you think of the chaos, what Garth Ennis scripts so well here and what artist Dalibor Talajic illustrates so well is, think of The Walking Dead, how powerful those first few episodes are of The Walking Dead, where we got such a strong sense of what the world would be if all of a sudden there were there were zombies and the type of apocalypse that would result. Well, imagine if all the infants right now, all the children right now were adults, and but you got the mind, the intellect of a child, the emotions of a child, but you're in a grown ass body and you're hungry and you want to feed and you're miserable or you're upset or you're happy and all of a sudden you're older and you're in a large body you don't understand. Chaos absolutely ensues. Airplanes crash to the ground. All the emergency personnel. Think of all the emergency personnel. There's no cops around. Why? Because every cop has a kid. And, every parent's going to go home and check on their kid. If you suddenly know that every child is suddenly an adult, you're going to want to go to your home, to your infant children, make sure they're okay. And so emergency personnel are in chaos. There's no one to help. And everything is absolute chaos. And this takes place across 50 issues. And this story follows Alex and Leo and their one son, Matt, their their child Matt, he's old enough that he's unaffected, but their child Ivan ends up getting left in their house as they're sort of going across country with Mrs. Skilling, this Hannah Skilling in their back seat, and she's sort of like the witch, and ultimately they end up at a hospital, and you end up with graphic scenes. Can you imagine pregnant women who are pregnant with children about to give birth, and then all of a sudden the children become adults? I mean, there's
That's
scenes
horrible. I
of
don't want to
gory.
think about that.
It's yeah, and there's this is not for the faint of heart. Some of the scenes here, it's very graphic. It's the broken bones, blood, guts, you name it. It is Garth Ennis after all. He's pretty good at scripting scenes
Yeah.
like that, and Dalibor Chalajic is very good at drawing them. I tell you that much. This is a great one shot. It's you could say it's typical Garth Ennis, but I say that and well, frankly, I love Garth Ennis. So when I say typical, I mean that in a very much a high compliment, because you know what you're getting with Garth Ennis. He knows what fans love, and he gives it to him in this one shot called The Kids, and it has got kind of a surprise ending because it is revealed or hinted at what caused this. Because at the end, there is a reversion back. The crisis seems to be over at the end, but it hints at something else that has result as a consequence of some quirky magic or evolution. It's sort of left a question mark in perfect fashion. And even though this is advertised as a one-shot, it's certainly ripe for a potential future story or another one-shot to follow. I don't know if that's going to happen, but if it does, I'd be picking it up. But this was a lot of fun. It was a great read. And it's nice to have one-shots like this that you can just pick it up and enjoy it for what it is. And you don't necessarily it prompts you a lot of reflection, especially with the frustration and the expressions of the witch that arguably created the curse that led to this. How she doesn't hate children, she hates parents, and every generation doesn't seem to learn. One generation is just as bad as the previous generation, and so the consequence of that from a humane point of view, from a mystical point of view, and again, different things that it hints at in the narrative. It's interesting, and it's a fun read. So, and a fantastic art by Dalibor Chalajic with Stefan Bartalik does the coloring. It's quite well done.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, as you're talking about it, a little bit of Crossed, which, you know, the Garth Ennis thing. And
Yeah.
I remember like reading Crossed, and at times, because I didn't find it, it had been out for like 20 issues or so. And I remember finding it and reading it and getting hooked and not being able to put it down. But at the same time, it being sort of repulsive in a way because of the brutality and the violence and the blood and just seeing the horrific things that people would do to each other. But the character work and it was also so compelling. It was so interesting. I was at the same time simultaneously repulsed and attracted to it. And that's sort of where I am with this Kids. I'm like, man, I don't want to read about a bunch of babies growing up instantly and horrible things happening and planes crashing and whatever. But at the same time, I'm like, well, if I can't help but put myself in that situation, what would I do? How would I try to fix things? Whatever. So yeah, really, really great job. Garth Ennis, he's sort of singular in the way that he tells stories and in his madness, as it were. So anyway, some other books that are out this week: Monstrous, which has been an Eisner Award winner tons of times, is up to issue 56. Feral, which has been a runaway hit, following on the heels of Stray Dogs from Tony Fleeks and Trish Forstner, is up to issue number 11. The horror anthology from Boom Studios, Hello Darkness, is up to issue 9. I can't believe 9 issues of that have come out already. That's crazy to me. We also have Doll Parts, A Lovesick Tale, which Rocky, I think, talked about maybe the first and second issue. Definitely the first issue. That's up to issue number 4. Also, Solomon Kane is getting a new, the pulp hero is getting a new take on his legend by Patrick Zurcher, who's both writing and drawing it. So that's over at Titan. Red Before Black, which is a series that we've really loved, has its 5th issue, which is similar to some of these issues that we talked about. A bit of a down issue, kind of a setup, I think, for the finale, but really fantastic. Definitely recommend that series from Stephanie Phillips. That one's over at Boom. Frankenstein, New World, The Sea of Forever issue 2. We had the creators on when issue 1 dropped to talk about that. That's set in the world of Hellboy, so that's really interesting. I didn't get a chance to read Kill Train number 3 yet, but we talked about the first 2 issues when they came out. Those were really fantastic. And then finally, we talked about the first 3 issues of this as well. Again, I just didn't get a chance to read it yet this week, but I'm highly anticipating checking out issue 4. And it's from writer Heath Corson. It's from the world of Minor Threats, The Brood, number 4, which, again, just a really fantastic story. I absolutely love the world of Minor Threats that Patton Oswalt and Jordan Blum have created, and have invited other creators to come in and tell their stories in that world as well. So, all right, Rocky. Easy call, tough call. What do you have for?
I'm actually challenged. This is one of those situations where I feel very satisfied because I feel like I just had a really juicy apple and a really really great orange. I love apples. I really love apples, and I love oranges. And I there's that expression, apples or oranges. I love them both. I really love Garth Ennis. I really love the kids. And but the last one that I read with that, because I had some extra time waiting for us to do this podcast, was we're taking everyone down with us by Matthew Rosenberg. That one's really good, and because I'm kind of a James Bond fan, and it's got a little bit of that, and it's got some villainy, it's got some irony, it's got some tragedy, and probably because I did listen to your interview with Matthew Rosenberg, a little bit of a bias there as well. So it's tough. I would go with kids for the horror element side, but we're taking it down. Everyone with us just wins by a nose because it's just checks off just a few more boxes. But it was really close this week for me. But I'd have to go with We're Taking Down Everyone with us by Matthew Rosenberg. That would be my choice.
I mean, that's a fantastic choice. I can't fault it. This was a really tough week for me as well. As opposed to, well, last week it ended up being a tie between the latest issue of Power Fantasy and The Last Boy. I just couldn't decide between the two. This week, in a way, it's sort of tougher. Like, it's almost like a 5-way tie. I don't think anything this week reached the heights that The Last Boy and Power Fantasy reached for me last week, but everything this week was really good, really above average. Department of Truth, Radiant Black was fantastic. We're taking everyone down with us. Really, really great. Dust to Dust continues to be good. Free for All is fantastic. The lead up to Lore War in Star Trek Defiant was good. The payoff in Big Burn was awesome. It's just really, really hard to pick one because nothing kind of stood above the others in a way. Just everything was kind of equally excellent. But if I got to pick one, I'm gonna go with Radiant Black. I'm glad it's back. It took a little bit of a hiatus after the Catalyst War. It feels like a whole new era. It still feels familiar, and I talked about that when I talked about Marshall. He's grown, he's evolved, but he's still the wisecracking Marshall that does silly things, maybe doesn't think them through. So there's enough familiar, but there's enough fresh, and adding in kind of the, along with the threats that he has to deal with on a physical and a superpowered sort of level, adding in the dynamics he's having to deal with kind of socially, people believing Radiant Black to be the villain because they came from a world where he lost, where he failed, and people died because of the consequence of that. That's really interesting to me as well. So giving a shout out to Radiant Black, a series that's been fantastic from the start, and I highly recommend it. So so that's going to do it for this episode, everybody. We appreciate you joining as always. Again, apologies that it's coming out a little late, and my profuse apologies for last week coming out a week late as well. Just a comedy of errors, a complete debacle. Hopefully we can avoid that happening in the future. So don't forget to check out our DC Spotlight if you want our thoughts on the DC books this week. Huge week, 16 books. Go over there and check it out, hear what our DC picks of the week are. That's available on Rocky's channel, Comic Space Boom ! On YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, and get that notification bell. We love to get conversations going in the comments and want to check out our thoughts on DC books, that comes out every Tuesday, late Tuesday, early Wednesday on Rocky's channel. All of the content, both the DC Spotlight as well as all of the content that comes out on the Comic Source YouTube channel, is also on our podcast feed. So just go to your favorite podcasting app or platform, do search for the Comic Source and subscribe. You'll have thousands and thousands of episodes to go back and listen to, as well as all the content going forward that's on the Comic Source YouTube channel is also on the audio feed, as I said. So be sure you are subscribed to the Comic Source YouTube channel. Just do a search for the Comic Source on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Tons of interviews coming up. Some coverage from WonderCon coming up. Chat with Ron Mars. Yeah, a bunch of stuff. And again, back matter and interviews and all kinds of great stuff over there as well. So we appreciate the support as always, and we will talk to you next time.
See, catch you later.